Hello and welcome to Kingston Now. I'm Jimmy Buff. Jon Bowermaster is a world-famous explorer and adventurer. He's crossed Antarctica by dog sled, kayaked all of the world's oceans, and was recently named an ocean hero by the National Geographic Society. He's also an award-winning journalist, author, filmmaker, and his latest film is Dear Governor Cuomo. Hi, Jon.
Yeah,
welcome to
Jimmy.
the show. So you've been all over the world. You've been to something like 80 countries. You've been to exotic places in the French Polynesian area. You've been to warm places. You've been to tropical places. How'd you end up in the Hudson Valley?
Well, like so many New Yorkers, New York Cityans, I was looking for an escape. And it got to a point where I didn't have to go to an office anymore, so I wanted to come live in the country. But I wanted proximity to the city, so I came up 25 plus years ago, and I'm gone a lot though. I think one year I was only home 77 days.
77 days the entire year?
Yeah, but mostly now I'm around 6 months out of the year.
Climate change, there is a loud and vocal opposition to climate change. What do you say to those people?
Well, you can argue till you're green or blue in the face as to what is causing the temperature to warm, but it's clear the temperatures are warming. I've been to Antarctica a couple dozen times, and I've been to the same place many, many, many times over the course of 20 years, and you can see the glaciers receding, without question. The air and water temperatures are getting warmer every year. So, again, you can argue why it's happening, but you can't argue that it is or isn't happening.
And you've been to the Maldive Islands, which is actually a place only literally inches above sea level?
Yeah, I think at the highest point it's kind of 6 feet. Most people live a foot above sea level, and you kind of wonder why.
But they're faced with an issue of having to move maybe the entire country because of rising sea levels.
Yeah, well, the Maldives and some other Pacific Island nations have literally started putting aside kind of percentage of their tourist dollars to buy land in India or Australia or something, and with the idea that they may not, their islands may not be livable in the near future.
So a lot of the issues that you've seen environmentally in your career have been far off places. And again, I'm going to bring you back to the Hudson Valley. Were you surprised to wake up one day and find out that you had a major environmental issue in your own backyard?
Well, I'd done all this international traveling and made a bunch of films about environmental issues around the world. And I went a few years ago, starting in 2008, and spent a lot of time in Louisiana. And made a film about the relationship between water and man in Louisiana. And everyone that we met in Louisiana, where they have horrific environmental problems, said, don't let this stuff happen in your backyard. And I started looking around in my own backyard, and I realized that this fracking issue, which is one of the most divisive issues in recent modern state history, it has all the elements that I've seen elsewhere around the world, with kind of utility and energy companies wanting their way, and locals being not so sure that what the energy companies are proposing is the right course.
So there is this huge groundswell in the area, a huge group of people who are opposed to fracking, and back in May they went to Albany to protest the issue of fracking, and your new film, Dear Governor Cuomo, is about that.
That's right. We staged an event on the 15th of May on the governor's doorstep at the Egg in Albany. Musicians, environmentalists, activists, with the idea that we should try and remind the governor that there's a lot of people out there who don't think that fracking is a good idea.
It was interesting because it was a concert and it was also a rally at the same time, and your film sort of combines the two. It's neither one nor the other, and it's just a fascinating watch. And before we go to break, let me roll a clip of Sandra Stein-Graber, who is an environmental biologist, talking to the people in the theater, I believe, the night of the music, about exactly what fracking is, and you do such a beautiful job intercutting it with one of the bands that performed last night, the Horseflies.
A mile below our feet is an ancient ocean floor suffused with heavy metals, radioactivity, and methane. The Marcellus Shale, our bedrock, our subterranean coral reef. The gas inside the Marcellus is scattered like a fizz of tiny bubbles, a petrified spill of champagne. Until a few years ago, it was too difficult and too unprofitable to capture. Enter an extreme form of fossil fuel extraction called high-volume horizontal hydraulic fracturing. Fracking. A drill bores straight down, turns sideways, and tunnels through the bedrock horizontally like a robotic mole. Explosives are sent down the hole. Boom. A 400-million-year-old world cracks open. Boom. Frack. Up the borehole flows the gas. Some of the water used to shatter the shale remains entombed among the shards, forever removed from the hydrological cycle. But the rest comes flying back out of the hole with the gas, bringing with it benzene, brine, radon, heavy metals. We have no plan in place for the safe containment of this lethal flowback. 1 million or more gallons for every well. Each well is a chimney in the earth, venting toxic gases into our communities. Each well requires an access road, a 5-acre well pad, a spider's web of pipeline, 50,000 gallons of chemicals, 4 to 9 million gallons of water, and at least 1,000 diesel truck trips. Between 34,000 and 95,000 wells are envisioned for upstate New York. Do the math.
It's an extraordinary clip of Sandra ending with her saying, do the math. And it seems simple enough, right? You talk about how much acreage is needed for a pad, a fracking pad, and the overland truck traffic, and you start to see the numbers add up, and it gets really scary.
Well, imagine that happening in Ulster County. Imagine that if we drove down 209 and you saw between here and when you go back to your other job, if there were 30 wells rising out of the dirt there.
Indeed.
It'd change the landscape dramatically.
And the band, the Horseflies, who were intercut with that clip, who are they?
Well, the Horseflies are an infamous kind of jazz, funk, country instrumental band from Ithaca. They have a huge following around the country.
Terrific. We're going to look more. We're going to look at more clips from the film and talk more about fracking when we come back. You're watching Kingston Now. More with Jon Bowermaster in a moment. Welcome back to Kingston Now. This week we're talking about fracking with Jon Bowermaster, the director of a new documentary called Dear Governor Cuomo. And John, was the documentary planned in conjunction with the rally? How did it come about? Was it serendipitous? You said, hey, we're going up there, we may as well film it?
No, it was all done very purposely. You know, we did a rally in the State House and then a concert at the Egg. But the Egg only fits 1,000 people, and we wanted this message to reach as many New Yorkers as possible. So, in fact, the filming was directed by Alex Gibney, who's a very famous documentary filmmaker. Most recently made the Client 9 about our previous governor, Elliot Spitzer. And he brought a crew of 6 shooters and 6 assistants, and he directed all of that filming. And at the end of the night, he handed me the hard drive and said, okay, go make the film. So, I mean, he's an Academy Award-winning filmmaker, so to have him involved was quite a luxury. But no, we planned that all along. Our goal is to get this film seen by as many people as possible, as quickly as possible, across the entirety of the state.
And the music, how did that portion of the evening come to pass? I mean, how were the bands picked? How was it orchestrated? Who played with who?
Well, one thing that I need to remind you is everyone who participated was a New Yorker. That was the guiding rule. Everyone this had to be in their backyard too. The music was all directed and orchestrated by Natalie Merchant and John Medeski. They chose all the artists. They invited all the artists, and then Natalie actually chose all of the songs. When you see the film, you'll see that I think in the film there are a dozen songs. That night there were maybe 16 or 17 performed, except for one occasion. Natalie does one of her own songs, but otherwise all the songs are performed by people who didn't write them, and they're big ensembles. You know, people have asked me what the film is like, or if it can be compared to anything, and the best I can come up with is it's a cross between The Last Waltz and An Inconvenient Truth, because it has this kind of big ensemble feel to it, which is really quite fun and powerful and moving in part because everyone on stage is a New Yorker. Everyone has skin in this game, you know.
There's celebrity in the movie too, in addition to Natalie Merchant and the people who are playing the music. Melissa Leo was there, the Academy Award-winning actress. Mark Ruffalo, Academy Award-nominated, or did he win? He may have actually won, Mark Ruffalo, who now lives in an area that might be impacted by fracking. And let's just take a quick look at Mark Ruffalo inside the Capitol building. Is that where this shot is?
It's in one of the State House buildings just next to the Capitol.
2 years ago, we stood in this beautiful state building and participated in our right of democracy. And we were asking for a moratorium on hydrofracking. We've been told 2 years ago, forget it, kid, go home. There's so much money flooding this state and so much money flooding the halls of Washington, D.C., you don't have a chance. Gas drilling is coming and there's nothing you can do about it. So go home, go back to sleep. So honored to have made the journey of 2 years and the evolution that I've seen happen in this movement from a handful of people to a swelling, beautiful, activated, and engaged group of citizens that have gone out and learned and educated themselves and have empowered themselves by using their voices and using their keyboards and using their telephones and using their love of a place to enshrine a grace in their community. And we are here today. We've made another evolution. We've gone from a moratorium, which at that time seemed like the reasonable thing to ask for. We needed to know more about the science. We needed to know more about what the medical community had to say. We needed to hear more about what the silent and often unheard voices of the victims had to say. And like our politicians here in New York, our thinking on this has evolved. And we're here to ask our governor to evolve along with us and use the science and use what has been taught to us by the victims and what has been taught to us by the medical community and evolve to ban fracking now.
So there's Mark Ruffalo, a world-famous actor, in the lobby of the State House in Albany, surrounded by a lot of citizens who were also there for the rally, really getting worked up about fracking. How does someone with that status, that celebrity status, get into a cause like this and help it?
Well, you know, it's easy to criticize celebrities when they lend their name to a cause, whether it's an environmental issue or otherwise. And certainly I've seen lots of that, where either a celebrity or probably usually their manager attaches their name to a cause, and that celebrity or that person has absolutely no knowledge or interest in the issue at all. But in many cases, you know, they're not just celebrities, they're citizens and their neighbors, etc. And Mark got involved because he recognized that fracking was happening right across the border from where he lived. He and his family lived in Pennsylvania, and he calls himself an accidental environmentalist. I mean, this was not his passion to get involved at this level, but he's become a very outspoken advocate for obviously for banning fracking now.
Indeed, I saw him actually appear on the Bill Maher program a couple months back, and his comment to Bill was, I'd actually rather be home in bed with my wife right now than sitting here talking to you about this.
Yeah, but he's wholly committed, and you know, sometimes we confuse these screen personalities or these celebrity personalities with their screen personas, and I guarantee that this is an extremely bright, committed, thoughtful individual, you know, no matter what your vision of him is through the roles he's played. Those are just jobs.
Your movie is called Dear Governor Cuomo. It's a very direct title, and I'm going to ask you about that when we come back. This is Kingston Now. We'll be back in a minute with Jon Bowermaster. You're watching Kingston Now, and we're joined again by National Geographic explorer Jon Bowermaster. John, the title of the movie, Dear Governor Cuomo, is, I mean, it's direct. It's a salutation for a letter. Are you hoping that he opens it like one and sits down and watches the 75 minutes and it has some impact?
Well, I certainly hope that someone in the governor's office at least will watch it. I'm sure they will. You know, politicians are both thick-skinned and thin-skinned, and he's going to want to know what the public is saying, especially in this kind of high-profile format. But I chose the title not without due caution. When the Department of Environmental Conservation opens inquiries up to the public and asks for comment in regard whether it's a health issue, an environmental issue, any kind of state policy issue, on average, maybe they'll get 1,000 letters. But when the DEC opened up the fracking issue for public comment, they've received more than 80,000 letters, most of them against fracking. The film, which you haven't seen the beginning of, opens with Mark Ruffalo in soliloquy addressing the audience and addressing the governor by saying, "Dear Governor Cuomo." So it wasn't too hard to come up with the title. But you know, I feel for the governor. I really do. It's a tough issue. You know, he's got the energy companies saying, well, we're going to bring jobs, and what governor doesn't want to tout jobs as his record? And he's got a lot of other people in his ear saying, listen, this is really not good for both the environment and public health, so you have to be really cautious. And he's a politician, so he needs votes. And I think he's in a tough place, because if he lifts that moratorium, which has been in place for 4 years, and allows fracking to start in New York, he's going to aggravate, or worse, every Democrat in the state. And he's up for election in 2014.
And some of them are up for election now.
Which is why he probably hasn't announced it now, because he didn't want every Democrat in the state having to run away from that during this current campaign season.
Is the decision solely on his shoulders? Can he unilaterally say yes or no?
Yeah, it's such a bizarre place. Yes, this is completely in the governor's plate. He can decide yes or no.
Isn't it enough that Pete Seeger said if he allows fracking, he'll be the worst governor in the history of New York State? Isn't that enough?
You know, if I were the governor, yes, I would not want Pete Seeger wagging his finger at me. But you know, the entirety of the event that we put on and the entirety of the film is very inviting to the governor. You know, you don't get anywhere with politicians by sticking your fingers in their eye. That doesn't work. They're going to, especially a guy like Governor Cuomo. He's not going to. He's a tough guy. He's not going to stand for that. Our appeal is to reason. Just that there are a lot of really smart people out there who've really investigated this process of natural gas extraction via hydraulic fracturing, and not just discovered, but have proven that it's a really bad thing for both the environment and people's health.
But there are people who are in favor of it, and there are people who believe that they're going to make money from it, who have farms where shale gas exists underneath, and they think there's a windfall in it. And there's a very powerful moment in your film when Natalie Merchant sort of addresses those people and those concerns. Let's take a look.
I see that many people stand to make a great amount of money, and it would be a massive sacrifice for those people, the landowners. But think about your children, your grandchildren. I'm gonna cry. Because I grew up in Western New York, and the people they're hurting. And so much of this event is about educating people about the risks. Because if a landman were to come to your door and say, tomorrow you have 200 acres, and tomorrow if you sign this piece of paper, I'll give you a check for $1 million. If you didn't know, and you're being told by the industry, it's safe, it's clean. If you knew that your children would be breaking out in rashes and vomiting, and Lord knows what else.
That's an exceedingly powerful emotional response from Natalie Merchant in that appeal. Was that, I mean, were you surprised by that during the filming?
Well, no. Anyone who knows Natalie knows that she wears these issues very close to the skin. I mean, these are personal issues, and what she was referring to when she talks about is this woman who in Ohio whose home she'd bought a house that was next to a fracking operation that she didn't know about, and she got horribly, horribly, horribly sick. There have been more than 1,000 confirmed sites of contamination across the country due to, and in the water they find fracking chemicals.
Where do we stand as of today with fracking in New York State? We're just in this holding period, people watching the governor to see what he's going to do?
Yes, I wouldn't be surprised any day to wake up and find a headline that the governor had lifted the moratorium. I mean, I just anticipate that that could happen. But, and kind of in May and over the summer, there were rumblings that he was going to lift the moratorium before Labor Day. That didn't happen. And then on September 21st, actually the governor's office announced that they were going to extend the study by asking the state health department to do more research and study into the health impacts of fracking. Our only concern is that it's a state operation. They're not going to consult with outside experts, et cetera. And then there are various kind of theories as to why they've done that, but it's good because anything that causes it to be delayed gives the governor more time to take in more information.
The film is called Dear Governor Cuomo, and it's screening this weekend in Hudson.
Hudson on Sunday the 21st and Rosendale on the 24th.
And then will people be able to purchase copies or see it online, or how will it work?
You know, I'm putting on my distribution hat tomorrow after the premiere, but we're going to give it away. We're going to get it to theaters and show it for free. I mean, we really want as many people in, you know, churches and schools and theaters, et cetera, to see this as possible.
Terrific. Thanks for being here, Jon.
Yeah, thanks, Jimmy.
That's it for this week's show. For more about Jon Bowermaster, go to jonbowermaster.com. Remember, all of our previous shows are available on our YouTube channel, and you can find that link on our Facebook page. For Kingston Now, I'm Jimmy Buck. We'll see you next time.